I'm in mourning. One of my favorite ever products has left the shelves. And I blame you, oat milk mafia. What do you mean? They've been revived? I guess we'll have to wait till the end for the epilogue to find out more about that story. Today we are going to do a deep dive into Mighty Drinks, the company responsible for one of my favorite products, Mighty Pea. This video isn't actually about milk. This video is the story of two brothers from Yorkshire who partnered with some of the world's biggest brands to bring the best milk to the UK market. We're going to look at why the company was forced into administration, even though, I might have mentioned this already, the product is by far the most superior vegan milk on the market. And yes, of course, I'll be telling you why this is objectively the case, and how there might be a light at the end of the tunnel after all. Stay tuned to hear the Mighty Drinks' fascinating story as one of the UK's rising stars in the startup scene of the early 2020s. It's the story of passion, of family, of technological excellence, and disappointment. Because as one of the founders, Tom Watkins, said, being a founder of a VC-backed food and drink business isn't so much a roller coaster. It is strapping yourself to a rocket and making sure you don't disintegrate on the way to orbit. Perhaps their story can teach us something, because today I'm going to introduce you to some real founders running a real company like real humans. My name is Dr. Becky Sage. I've been a founder multiple times, and now I work with hundreds of entrepreneurs. I'm here to demystify what it is to be an entrepreneur, through which I hope to give you the inspiration to get started or to keep going on your entrepreneurial journey. And I want to be part of your support system along the way. If you're a founder or you're thinking about it and you've got any questions, just pop them in the comments. And you know what? There is so much for us to learn from this Mighty Pea story. And yes, if you were wondering, Mighty Pea is probably one of my special interests at this point. And yes, I have purchased as many as I could get my hands on before I lost them forever. Or maybe not. I love Mighty Pea, but it went into administration, so am I the only one? Is it Marmite? Did it go into administration because so many of you just didn't like it? I guess we'll find out as we go through the rest of this video. So what's the pitch with Mighty Pea? And I know some of you may have been thinking the same thing as one of my friends. I did say pea milk, not pea milk. I'll let the founders explain.
We're on a mission to get people to drink our pea. Honestly, it's not even that weird. I mean, people drink cat poop coffee. And you're telling me that we're the weird ones? Go on, drink our pea.
So for reasons that will become obvious later, I am choosing just to pitch you pea milk, the Mighty Pea, and not the whole Mighty Drinks family, just as Nick and Tom did right in the beginning. The pea milk pitch is really quite easy because it is the best milk. And don't worry, this whole video isn't just going to be me loving pea milk. Sometimes my passion for it just spills out. And I'm not even being sarcastic. 99% of households in the UK buy milk. 23% of Brits choose dairy-free. But there really are a lot of issues with most of the milks on the market. Dairy, not good for the lactose intolerant, vegans, or the planet. Oat, this is the devil, yes. I will tell you why later, but it is not milk. It doesn't do any of the things milk is meant to do. Coconut, what's the point? Almond curdles in coffee. Have you ever had an almond cappuccino? Ugh. Soya, it'll have to do. I've certainly had my fair share of unsweetened soya, especially since I couldn't get my hands on this. Although every time I drink it, I feel guilt because of all the deforestation. Pea saves water, tastes better, great consistency, low carbon footprint compared to many of the other milks. Done. What more could you want? What's that? You also want high protein because milk is there to be a protein source, unlike oat milk. Yes, absolutely. Pea milk is high in protein. And why drink Mighty Pea over other pea milk alternatives? First of all, pea milk is few and far between, but secondly, Mighty Pea have developed their own IP, using biomass fermentation and precise fermentation to make it look, act, and taste like milk. And it is really great. I give it to people who are dairy milk drinkers, and they never complain about it. So why wouldn't you choose the one that tastes the best, has great environmental credentials, and actually copes with being put in a hot drink? It was the first pea milk to market in the UK. Like I said, there are a couple of others that exist now, but it is the only one that doesn't leave a horrible residue at the bottom. And one of my favorite details, this is actually the thing that made me really fall in love with this business in the first place, before I'd done the deep dive, before I knew anything else other than the credibility of the product. This really excited, oh, wrong way. Well, there's some of it. This really excited me. I work a lot with impact businesses. In fact, I even ran an accelerator once helping impactful businesses show their impact. And because the impact side of it is so important to customers, investors, and the Mighty Pea team, they actually got a study done on the savings that could be made by changing to pea milk. And honestly, if anyone's looking to communicate things quickly, this is such a good example. Small changes make mighty impact. If 1 million people switch to high protein pea milk, for 1 year, we could save enough CO2 emissions to fill 63,000 hot air balloons, as well as saving 22,000 acres of land and save enough water to fill over 43 stadiums. You say you care about the environment, but are you still guzzling dairy milk? For those who want a high protein alternative to dairy that actually tastes good, this is your guy. Why aren't you drinking pea milk? Now, I actually came across an early pitch that the founders did themselves, so why don't we let them do it their way?
I'm Nick.
I'm Tom,
We milk peas.
and we want you to drink our pea.
100% plant-based.
Fortified with calcium, vitamin D, B12 and iodine.
Zero added sugar.
More protein than oat,
Fewer allergens than soy.
more calcium than cow.
20 grams of protein a carton.
No added sugar,
High calcium.
no dairy or nuts.
Eco-humble yellow peas.
Fortified for gains.
No cow. 20 grams of clean, unsweetened, plant-living protein.
Nick Watkins and Tom Watkins, two brothers who grew up in Yorkshire. Both attended Nottingham Trent University and spent the early part of their careers gaining vital experience in the FMCG sector. But working to sell other people's products opened up a new ambition to find a gap in the market that they could fill. Enter pea milk. There are already some products in the USA, but no products in the UK. So in 2018, they came to their family and said, "We're going to be quitting our well-paid jobs to sell pea milk." According to Nick, it was met with less than enthusiastic responses. Nonetheless, in March 2018, they founded Watkins Drinks. Never before had they manufactured a product. But using Google, they found some instructions to make pea milk, gathered the ingredients, found themselves in Nick's basement grinding up yellow split peas. In their words, it was a disaster. But they knew that yellow split peas were a super ingredient, so they did not stop there. And there are a few factors at play which set them up to take the leap. The first thing was market growth and a gap in the market. In 2018, the global alternative milk market was valued at 13 to 17 billion and growing at a double-digit rate. Consumers were moving away from dairy milk for both health and environmental reasons, and alternative milks were making waves. Pea milk is not that prominent anywhere, but the complete clear gap in the market was the UK. So this was a very clear target market, and broadly speaking, a market that the brothers understood. So check, market growth and a gap in the market. Secondly, they had experience of working together. They talked about having 10 years out in the workplace before they started Mighty, and they'd worked in the same organization. So not only had they discovered their own strengths, their own knowledge, they'd built experiences in the sector, but they'd also understood each other, how they each work, what they could bring to the company, what their strengths were. And throughout the whole time of Mighty, they remained equal in shareholding. They were both co-founders, they were both co-CEO, and they both do quite a lot of the advocating for the business. So you see both of them out there talking about it. The third thing is experience, and I think something very useful is, in particular, having experience working in sales in the sector, because what that means is you already know those sales processes, you know those sales life cycle, you already have the connections into the people who you're going to need connections to in order to make those sales. You probably can much more easily build partnerships. And you can, from the beginning, at least make slightly better assumptions about where you're going. Another thing that actually set them up really well was the fact that they are, in fact, from a cluster of alternative meat companies. Who knew? Did you know that the Mighty Corn, they're not actually called Mighty Corn, like Mighty Pea, although Mighty does seem to come up a lot. Just hold that thought. Corn is headquartered in Yorkshire, as are other plant-based businesses such as VFC, Meatless Farm, and Plant and Bean. In fact, Nick described it as fast becoming the Silicon Valley of plant-based food because of the fantastic companies and brands that were coming out of that area. Now, what happens when you have a cluster is that you not only have your peer group of people, so that can be really helpful in itself, people around you who are going through similar things, who maybe can introduce you to people, but you also end up attracting advisors, mentors who have a better understanding of the space and better connections and who can help you better. But then you also, by being a cluster, attract other people in towards you. So your gravity basically is bigger when it comes to partnerships, sales, investors. You're going to pull all those people in, not just from the strength of you and your business, but from the strength of all of those businesses as a collective. And then the other thing that they seem to have is supportive family. So not only do they have each other, and they're a support to one another, and they went through all of this together as brothers, there were also two other Watkins on the board when the business first started, and I think that's probably their parents, although I don't 100% know that for sure. And even though when they went to their partners, obviously there were probably a few questions about quitting their well-paying job and getting into pea milk, but they did take the leap. So I think having that support plays in multiple ways. I think it can help you with your resilience as a founder, which is one of the things that we talk about all the time with entrepreneurship. But it also means that you can probably make slightly more confident decisions if you've got that support. And I find with a lot of founders, they're really trying to prove themselves. If they don't necessarily have that support system, it's really easy for their worth to get really damaged by the ups and downs of the business. And if you've got a good support around you, they can help you out. Also, potentially financially, then if you've got a good support around you, then that might also be helpful. Not necessarily though. So, from a basement in Batley, Yorkshire, don't worry, I'm not going to try and do the accent, the UK's first pea milk brand, under the banner of the Mighty Society, was born on the three core pillars of Mighty: taste, sustainability, and nutrition. One thing that does not get talked about enough when it comes to startup businesses is the value of partnerships. So let's start with looking at Mighty's manufacturing partnership. They realized pretty early on that this product was going to be quite shit if they kept making it themselves. So they built key partnerships, working closely with manufacturers and food technology experts to develop food technology approaches that would allow them to fulfill their goal to make a pea milk that, as I've already mentioned, is using biomass fermentation and precise fermentation to make it look, act, and taste like milk. There doesn't appear to be any patents owned by Watkins Drinks or any of the associated entities. So I guess they protected their IP with trade secrets. It would have been especially important to have strong, trusted relationships with the manufacturers and the food scientists that worked with them. Because believe me when I say this is the best taste and texture of any milk alternative. The secret sauce is working. But the partnerships didn't stop there. Distribution partners were vital, and supermarkets were the primary target. After getting in touch with many major supermarket brands, Mighty was selected to be part of the Sainsbury's Future Brand Programme. Woo! And they were really excited about bringing pea milk to the UK. Were you Sainsbury's? Were you excited? Because I normally get my pea milk from you, but I had to get all of these from Amazon. You were that excited. Anyway, now this was a majorly exciting time for the Watkins brothers. One of the major supermarkets wanted to work with them, and when they were part of the Sainsbury's Future Brand Programme, they did a redesign of the carton, and at that time, which was 2019, they finally got their products on the shelves. And I say finally, this was actually so quick. They started the company in 2018, this was in 2019. Crazy. Rachel Eyre, head of future brands at Sainsbury's at the time, said, "At Sainsbury's, we're always looking for exciting new brands and products that appeal to our growing customer needs and lifestyle choices. We're really excited about launching the Mighty Society and it joining the Future Brands programme. We believe our customers will really enjoy this great tasting plant-based alternative." But this is actually the moment that the Mighty team cite as one of their biggest mistakes. Why? Because they signed an exclusivity deal with Sainsbury's, which would bring the product to hundreds of stores, but block them from being able to work with other supermarkets. And lo and behold, about 2 weeks later, the call came in from Tesco's. But at that time, the exclusivity kept them out. Eventually, Mighty Pea joined the Tesco incubator program in April 2021. This was 2 whole years and a global pandemic later. Nick gives the Tesco incubator scheme credit for huge acceleration. In particular, they were one of just 4 companies selected at the time. So they got a lot of nurturing, including access to the Tesco C-suite, giving them insight and understanding from the people at the very top. So what lessons can we learn from Mighty about partnerships? First of all, the speed at which they got this thing to market. I think this just shows that they already had put some work in before they started the business. And I've talked about this before. There is a video I just posted about what to do before you start a business. And honestly, the more you can get under your belt before you press go, the better. They partnered with people both on the product side and on the distribution side. So on the product side, they could really develop a product that was good. And then they had these distribution partnerships, which really gave them a competitive edge and got them to market very quickly. Many startups spend years just trying to form these relationships. But some of this probably also comes from the fact that Nick and Tom had both worked in this sector already. They also had investors that were connected into this sector, and I will come on to their investment journey in a moment. But of course, we can't walk past this without picking up on the biggest mistake, according to Nick Watkins, which was to sign this exclusivity deal. But the thing is, as a startup, you can only make decisions with the information that you have at a given time. It's very easy in hindsight, knowing that Tesco call was about to come in, to say you probably shouldn't have signed that deal. You could also say, really take a look at the deal and negotiate. You know what? If product is good enough, if they're excited enough about what you're doing, then there may be some movement in the terms of that partnership. Could they also have used Sainsbury's to lever Tesco's at that time? I don't know exactly what was going on in their minds, but there was probably a great deal of excitement that they were going to be able to get their product onto the shelves of a major supermarket, hundreds of stores across the UK. And perhaps that's what was really driving that decision. They're like, yep, let's sign up for that. But actually, they were in a more powerful position than they realized. And I think this is often the way with founders, although there are some who think they are way more powerful than they actually are. And this is why it's really important to have an objective view of what it is you are doing as a founder. If you know this product is good, if you know it's got all of these benefits, why wouldn't both Sainsbury's and Tesco's want to put it on the shelf? Now, if they'd have known that both of them wanted it, then they may have spent a bit more time making that decision. How would they have made that decision? Which one would they have chosen? Would they have been able to see, without the benefit of hindsight, which one was going to be the better partnership? And again, maybe they'd have just negotiated for that exclusivity, that exclusivity clause to have come out of the Sainsbury's contract. So the Mighty Society, as it was then, got a pretty long way without external investment. But as soon as production was required, as they walked towards getting this deal with Sainsbury's, they embarked on what seems to be perhaps a non-stop fundraising journey. Based on the comments made by both Tom and Nick recently, I think it probably felt that way to them too. So the first funding, this came prior to the launch in January 2019. They did a seed round of 200k at a pre-money valuation of 400k, a post-money valuation of 600. It's not clear exactly who the initial investor was, but essentially they ended up with a third of the company. A third to Tom, a third to Nick, a third to this other investor, which seems like an awful lot to give away at this stage, given how close, or certainly from a time perspective, Mighty seemed to be to market. Again, this is in hindsight, much easier to say. But I'm going to assume they were at a bit of a sticking point, which was they needed this investment to actually produce the product. Without that, how could they then go to the supermarkets and put it on the supermarket shelves? The catch-22 that so many founders find themselves in. Now I wonder if they could have negotiated something slightly more favourable at this point in time, but perhaps they didn't realise quite how many rounds of investment they would still need to do in order to continue to grow. Claire Smith, who is the CEO and CIO of Beyond Impact, became a director during this month, so I'm going to assume that that first investment was related to them. Between this investment and the next one, which was not that long in time, it was only 9 months, several value inflection points were hit. These are the points at which the value of the company suddenly accelerates. The products hit the shelves. They had the Sainsbury's partnership. They were also selling in Whole Foods. So on the 13th of November 2019, they raised 440k in an equity crowdfunding round through Seeders for a pre-money valuation of 3.91 million. And this brought in many other investors. Because it was a crowdfunding round, they had 44 different investors. And some of those were bigger investors that came in at that time. For those of you who don't know, that when you do crowdfunding rounds, you do tend to have to secure a certain amount of it prior to then putting it on the crowdfunding platform. So in 9 months, they had increased their valuation by almost 3 million. This is amazing growth, represented by getting the product to market, getting sales, getting good feedback. Perhaps this was also the peak of the non-meat bubble, at least for now. Almost immediately after they closed this fundraising round, they launched the brand new Mighty Pea. And the Mighty Pea brand was launched on the 17th of November 2019. It didn't make me a happy little bunny then, because I didn't even know it existed. But we'll talk about marketing later. Now, as this investment was landing and this new brand was launching, reports were coming out of China of a virus. Some flu-like symptoms, but with severe respiratory symptoms. It was extremely contagious. All of us at that time, the Watkins brothers included, were oblivious to the disruptions that were heading our way. So they kept marching on. They released their barista blend pea milk in January of 2020, and then the pandemic hit. But they kept going, perhaps leaning on that support system that we talked about before, trying to figure things out, but already with some of the distribution partnerships, which meant that they were on the shelves and customers could buy their product. I have no doubt that some of these boxes were being wiped down by bleach at that point in time. Again, not by me, because I didn't know it existed yet. And the next funding that came in was on the 9th of July 2020. This was a convertible loan which got converted in the next round. And I think it was probably a future fund convertible note, because during that time, especially during COVID, this future fund was a lifeline for many brands. There have also been some controversies around it, and maybe we can talk about that at another time. It was then a whole year later, on the 14th of July 2020, that convertible note converted, and this seed round raised £2.44 million, with a pre-money valuation of 4.33. This is actually a very slight down round from the round that they'd done back at the end of 2019, where their post-money valuation had been £4.35 million. From an investor perspective, there wasn't really a change in valuation, even though many things had changed for the company at that time. This is when some pretty big names came on board, and the investors included Beyond Impact, Bitburger Holdings, Dola Ventures, the Future Fund, as I mentioned already, and Veg Capital. And I do want to note, they gave away 36% during this round. So what were the factors involved with this valuation not really increasing, or not increasing at all? First of all, when this money came in 2021, they had only just gone onto the Tesco incubator. So they hadn't really seen the benefits of that yet. COVID had happened, and that had been quite a mixed bag for the alt milk community. The Ukraine war had begun, leading to quite a lot of uncertainty around pricing and an increase in manufacturing and distribution costs. Although we have to say what we know now, which is this was just the beginning of that. The cost of living was nowhere near at its worst. So following all of this, the non-meat market really did start to show struggles with some of those businesses, even those ones that were part of that cluster alongside Mighty, having to go into administration. But Mighty actually accelerated through, the Tesco incubator doing what it was there to do, put a rocket pack on the business. And even though that valuation had been pretty flat from one round to the next, they actually doubled their valuation in the following 18 months. And on the 6th of December 2022, they raised 9.37 million on a pre-money valuation of 12.48 million. Again, many big investment names came on board at this time, but they also gave away 42% in this round. Yeah, keep up. Now, one thing I haven't managed to find in any of the data is any revenue for Mighty Pea, for Mighty Drinks, Watkins Drinks. I'm going to assume that there was significant growth and that the product was well liked. But the accounts show that Mighty was never profitable, and the losses continued to grow year on year. This was the final investment round, and it left the founders with just 2.3% each. The cap table at this point was very busy, with many different types of shares. I would not like to have been the person trying to get everyone's signatures for a shareholders resolution on this one. So the total raised in all of these rounds was 12.45 million. So what can we learn from the Watkins Drinks investment journey? First of all, I want to talk about how important impact was. The mission of the business was very, very clear. And as I've already shown you, they were very vocal about the impact credentials of this product. I believe that was because they were being invested in by impact funds, but also importantly, because the market relies on impact. Some of the people that make choices to move to vegan milks do it for impact purposes. And they really did live by that. They were the first brand in the UK to join with the NGO Foundation Earth, and that did the full life cycle analysis. But you also know that they cared about this and that it was important to their market and their investors because they were also very articulate about the impact of their product, of their brand, their product portfolio. Okay, next lesson. Let's talk about convertible loans. These are becoming ever more popular. Some of you, they're very similar to ASAs. And so if you're watching in the States, then you probably are more familiar with ASAs. We call them convertible loans here, and they are a little bit different because of the terms. Convertible loans can be quite tricky because once you've taken that convertible loan, if you don't manage to raise in the future, then it sits on your books as a loan, and then you have to be able to pay back that loan. If they've taken $1 million, then they need to pay back $1 million if they hadn't done a future round. But it can be a really great way of getting money into the business when, for whatever reason, you don't want to do a valuation at that point in time, or the investors don't want to do a valuation at that point in time. We actually did take convertible notes in my first business. I'm saying convertible note because we actually took a convertible grant into our business, which meant we didn't have to necessarily pay it back. We just had to show that we made impact. But largely these are convertible loans where they do have to be paid back. The next thing to say, and this is something the brothers did talk about, is that investment is more than capital. And in particular, they brought up this relationship that they had with Claire Smith from Beyond Impact. And because she was involved from very, very early on, they were able to build a strong relationship with her. She was a core part of the team. And often founders are looking for that person who understands the market, who can be a sounding board, as well as somebody who brings money in. And vice versa. Often investors really want to be involved with building something exciting. Now, not all founders, not all investors, not all rounds work that way, but it can be something that can be really valuable to companies. Now, for many of you out there, you'll probably be thinking 12.45 million, if only I could get that into my business. If we compare this to Oatly, who've had £1.54 billion, and they are a major competitor of Watkins, you can see why 12.45 million may have been enough to do everything that needed to be done to be competitive. So another thing I want to discuss here in terms of lessons learned is something someone once said to me: "Are you a strong CEO?" And I was like, what? I do gymnastics, does that make me strong? And it was a term that I haven't really heard that much, but the indication being, like, how much of a percentage do you have? Are you a person of significant control in the business? And in this particular case, the founders lost their person of significant control in 2021, which means that they dropped below 25% ownership each. Of course, there were two of them, so it kind of doubles up. Now, in most businesses, this then means that perhaps you can't veto a special resolution. And I've had a quick look at the updated articles for Watkins Drinks, and I don't think that this was changed for them. It may have been in other documents, but so long as the brothers stuck together, at that point they still had a lot of control. I haven't got time to dive into all of their different share classes at this point. But if you are a founder, this is the kind of stuff that you will end up getting very, very familiar with, especially if you go down that investment route. And it's one of the reasons why early on, a lot of investors won't even let you that much away. There's always that negotiation of how much you're going to give away, because they know that there's likely to be future rounds, and they don't want the founders to end up with a very low share of the company. Because the founders are the most passionate people, and they want to continue to be motivated to build this company. That's in the best interest of all the investors. So by the time they got to the end of this journey, having only 2.3% each meant that they weren't necessarily in that strong position as co-CEOs. Having said that, they were still directors, founders, the face of the company, and steering all of those everyday decisions. It just meant that the relationship with the investors became ever more important, and it meant that the investors were definitely in a stronger position to make decisions for the company. We've fought through Brexit, a pandemic, inflation, massive global instability, not to mention the perpetual challenges to go up against some of the biggest FMCG brands in the world, who all wanted a slice of the alt milk category. This is what Tom Watkins said when they announced that they were going into administration. Looking back, you can see their struggle, just as they'd got through some of those early exciting milestones. They'd done that successful equity crowd raise, and then the world kind of turned upside down. I know, we've all been through it. And yet they did continue to evolve the company over the next 5 years with an ever-expanding product portfolio. Till that fateful day when I skipped to the milk aisle in Sainsbury's, only to find a gap where my pea milk should be. I'm like, And as I stood there in the aisle, I was being stared down by a wall of oat milk. It taunted me as I rapidly Googled Mighty Pea, and the news was not what I wanted to read. Watkins Drinks, the owners of Mighty Pea, had gone into administration. I can only imagine how that impacted the founders and the 19 staff members who were reported to be working for Watkins Drinks at that time. Actually, I can sort of imagine it. Before we made the decision to go through an acquisition for my company, we'd had to really downsize. We gave notice to many of our team members, we had to move out of our office. It was not a fun day. So both founders made a statement on LinkedIn with similar sentiments. Nick said, "After an incredible journey, it's with a heavy heart that we share the news that Mighty has entered administration. This is not the outcome any founder hopes for. Building Mighty from the ground up has been one of the most challenging and rewarding experiences of our lives for both my brother Tom and me." Tom also said, "I've asked myself a lot lately. Was it worth it? The constant worry about runway, investors, new listings, rate of sale, the criticism, the moments of doubt. The job can be thankless and the odds of a big exit statistically tiny. There were times, especially in the last 18 months, where the answer felt like no. But the truth is, I don't think there's a more transformative thing you can do. Getting into the arena takes guts. It's brutal, it's enlightening, it's terrifying." Any founder watching this, I know you understand that tension, this personal battle. For many of us, we push and push and push as hard as we can till inevitably it is time to walk away. The truth is that that moment when you decide to walk away, to close the business, maybe to call in the administrators, will always feel like the cliff edge that you're trying desperately not to fall over until you actually get there. And sometimes those moments, while poignant, while sad, can also feel like a bit of a relief. So why did Mighty go into administration? Many reasons have been cited for Mighty's administration. Nick stated, "Despite our best efforts, we couldn't overcome the current market headwinds and funding environment surrounding the plant-based and dairy alternative sector. Administration is tough, but sometimes a necessary step." Tom added, "But the reality is the plant-based category has shifted dramatically over the last few years. Despite our best efforts to adapt, streamline and secure new investment, we couldn't raise what was needed to take the next step." So the headline is that the cash ran out and the sources of cash that they'd relied on before perhaps were not forthcoming. And the thing is, this is the number one reason for businesses shutting down, because they don't have the cash that they need to keep going. So in a business, we essentially have two options when it comes to cash, especially if you're a startup business. You have investors or external funding of some sort, or you have customers or the market. And the only other option you have is streamlining so that your runway goes further. And you do that by reducing expenses, but that's not always possible while continuing to keep the business going. And the reality of Mighty is that the P&L never went positive. The costs always outweighed the sales. The lingering question, and one I am sure they were working towards answering, is whether it was going to actually be possible to balance that P&L. What kind of sales would have pushed the balance into the black? Investors were looking for improved margins and increased sales volumes, and this is a trend across the whole investment market. If you watched my Slack video where we talked about how they never went profitable even before their IPO, before their acquisition, and yet they still managed to raise nearly $1 billion in investment. These scenarios are few and far between and becoming less and less common. Now, there are obviously efficiencies of scale that could have been had, but unfortunately it didn't seem like Mighty were trending in that direction yet. Year on year, the loss is getting bigger, even if those sales volumes were getting bigger over time too. But if this proposition was never going to be viable, why did it attract so much investment in the first place? The other question is, have people essentially stopped buying non-dairy alternatives? Prior to their insolvency, there was a market downturn, with retail sales of milk alternatives falling by 2.3% and volumes dropping by 2.6%. And the sector reduced its pricing by 3% to match that price decrease of cow's milk, but it still continued to drop. And on average, plant-based milk is 69% more expensive than cow's milk. Last year, plant-based made up 11% of alt milk sales. However, barista milks saw a 10.4% sales growth, with oat milk being especially popular, accounting for more than half of alternative milk sales in 2024. Which leads me to my conspiracy theory. Less a conspiracy theory, more a suggestion of what might have happened, my view on this whole market. And I want to give a quick disclaimer that I obviously was not involved in this, and none of this is designed to undermine the decisions that founders made at the time, or to assume that they didn't do everything they could have done in the moment. Hopefully it doesn't come across like that, but just in case it does, that's not what I'm saying. Everything is easier with the gift of hindsight and perspective. So here it is. I blame oat milk, both inside and outside the company. I feel like it's probably time to disclose that I am gluten-free, and not all oat milks, in fact most oat milks in Europe, are not gluten-free, unless specified. And I think oat milk was to blame, both in terms of external factors, but also internal strategy. Oatly and its 1.54 billion have taken over, and I don't understand it. You want to know why I drink at big coffee chains rather than nice little cafes most of the time? Oat milk. I walk in and I'm like, hi, what non-dairy milks? Or what milks do you have? Oh, cow's milk and oat milk. It makes me so angry because it's usually said really smugly as well. Like, well, we do oat milk and not any of the other alternative milks because it's so much better environmentally. So I then tend to passive-aggressively respond, I can't do oat milk, it's not gluten-free. Bye. No, I don't do that. Also, it has no protein. So then I head over to Starbucks or Costa's for my soya cappuccino. With all of its land usage and water usage issues, you made me do that, oat milk mafia. You! Okay, granted some places have started to do gluten-free oat milk, but why would I want oat milk? It's got no protein! To every coffee shop owner out there, you lovely people who are trying to do right things for the planet, don't let this oat milk story fool you. If you want to show off your health and your ethical credentials, you should have got oat milk. No, not oat milk. You should have got pea milk. Sorry. And they believe that they're buying oat milk for the right reasons. And some people like the taste of porridge in their coffee. Anyway, so let's turn this focus internally. I personally think that spending some of that investment money on the wide diversification of products, including oat milk and other oat-based drinks, did not make sense for Mighty. In an interview with Nick, he discussed that you don't want to have too many products. But then he also discussed the fantastic tech products and the investors and the new innovation, talking about new products and new markets. But what about existing products for a new market? Or even existing products for its existing market? Did I not matter? Oat milk made up 50% of the alt milk category. Some drink it for the taste, but many do choose it for the environmental credentials. But mostly, it's the it girl of vegan milks. They did it for the gram. But why couldn't Mighty Pea be the it girl of vegan milks? It could. It's got better consistency, taste, protein contents. You could have converted some of the oat drinkers, more of the soya market, and become a much bigger player in the alt milk segment, regardless of turbulent market forces. Why compete with an oat milk product? Although they did make one that was high in protein, so it makes me slightly less angry. But otherwise, Mighty doing an oat-based product felt very incongruent to me. If people are gonna buy oat milk, they're just gonna pick the most familiar one or the cheapest one. Now, I do know that Mighty had a lot of success with their powdered oat milk sachets. People really liked them. And I do kind of understand those a little bit more, but I also think that the initial differentiation was being the first pea milk to market and this incredible quality of the pea milk. And I would have so strongly leaned into that. Until this was fighting off that oat milk mafia with as high a proportion of the market, I don't think I would have diversified into those other products. Now, of course, I do not know why those decisions were made at a given time. My guess is that maybe there were investors out there that didn't agree. And also, again, it's much easier to make these kind of decisions in hindsight. Perhaps seeing the hype around oat milk, seeing a much more established product, knowing that there's less market education that needs to be done. And also, on the cost side, oat was probably more established as a product. There were likely lower production and raw material costs. And then the higher market demand because it was more well known. Yet I would have still doubled down on the pea product. Make people love this, know this, increase volumes, and ultimately through economies of scale increase those margins. But how? I would have used the strategy that was already working for Mighty: partnerships. I would have invested in marketing and market education through those partnerships. Coffee chains, regional restaurant chains. We have one here in the southwest of England called The Lounges, who are scaling quite nicely. And while we are at it, I do want to have a bit of a chat about the marketing. Now, Tom and Nick had a sales background, and this seemed really apparent when it came to like how quickly they got to market by those great relationships that they built with the supermarkets. They seemed to understand that side of the market really well and achieved great success with it. However, the only reason anyone I know knew about Mighty Pea was because I wouldn't shut up about it. Since sometime, I don't know, in the noughties, I've been that person that goes to the shelves and is looking at all the different nutritional value and ingredients. I kind of have to in many ways because I'm gluten-free, because I'm veggie, because I'm an amateur athlete and I need to get my protein in. I'm always checking these things out. And when I saw this pea on the shelves, especially with the incredible impact, I know, pea on the shelves, when I saw the Mighty Pea on the shelves, I knew that I had to try it. I didn't know if I'd like it, but it turns out the taste is great. But other than me and few others like me, nobody is picking up Mighty Pea from the shelves unless they are specifically looking for it. So the B2C marketing strategy was really important. I've already mentioned the coffee shops and restaurant partnerships, and I think this could go such a long way to raise awareness. Tastes like milk, feels like milk, but none of the dairy. High protein vegan coffees. Perfect for Veganuary. I can't even say that word. Veganuary. Head on over to Costa's. They did a whole high protein coffee thing last year. And do a partnership. Now I know it's not necessarily as simple as that, but wouldn't that be great? In terms of content and advertising, Mighty had some fun content, but it always felt a little bit incoherent. A little bit of shade on oat milk, followed by oat milk products. Just keep shading the oat milk, that's what I say. Get rid of the products. But as you know, I'm probably a little bit biased at this point. But to me, I think it was very unclear what was the strategy that sat behind that social content. Is it that's driving somebody to that pea milk account? Where is the brand awareness side of that? Because, you know, nobody's searching out pea milk. And I'm sure Mighty targeted different segments. I'm sure there were people like me, veggies, peskies, who are into sport, into nutrition, want that high protein, maybe health conscious, care about the planet, but not a total evangelist. But you know, the other person who, or the other segment I would definitely target would be the environmental boomers. They like to do park runs. They're probably not quite built vegan, but yes, I am looking at you, Dad. Look, I know you can't just go out there and convert me and my dad and be done with it. It just felt like a strong marketing strategy to some specific segments wasn't fully fleshed out. And I get it, the price can't necessarily compete with dairy, but I have to tell you, once my Nectar rewards are applied, my Mighty Pea was never that much more expensive in Sainsbury's. I think that their team had great salespeople. They knew the sector. They threw themselves into the product and the fundraising. There was some fun content there too. They loved the product. The product does speak for itself. But perhaps they ran out of time or the money to buy that time to fully deliver on their fleshed out strategy. And it's not new news that the investment landscape is not good right now. Maybe their investors weren't even able to do follow-on because they were in a sector where other companies had already gone into administration. They didn't get their money back from those companies. The market's not great at the moment, so there's probably not lots of big exits. So those investors are going to have less funds available to do follow-on investment, and perhaps they're going to be slightly more risk averse. Now, everything that I've talked about is actually so common for founders. I see so many of these things over and over again with the people that I work with. And I think especially with first-time founders, you're looking for all those benefits of hindsight whilst having to make decisions in real time. I worked out that neither of these founders are even 40 yet. Like, come on, they've had so much success. They have a much loved, see? Maybe it's just me and my crazy ways, but they have a much loved business and product. It was successful. But if you've seen my Slack video, you'll know that second-time founders are even more successful. And if anyone is questioning my definition of a successful business, as Nick said, we're incredibly proud of what we achieved. Launching true first-to-market innovation, partnering with leading retailers, helping millions of people with allergies or specific dietary needs across the world. If you come for that, then you gotta get through me.
Okay, guys, we're back. Did you miss us? Because we missed you.
Okay, I'm excited right now. My beloved pea milk is back. It is not gone for good. Watkins Drinks was acquired by the Mighty Kitchen on the 28th of July 2025, and the socials are up and running again. James Clark, Managing Director at Interpath and Joint Administrator of Watkins Drinks, said, "We're pleased to have secured a sale of the Mighty Drinks brand to the Mighty Kitchen, ensuring that continuation of a well-regarded name in the plant-based sector. The transaction provides a platform for the brand's future and the opportunity for the purchaser to exploit the brand overseas." So, a tiny bit about the Mighty Kitchen. The Mighty Kitchen was established in the UK in 2023, then dissolved in 2024, then re-established in 2024, both times under the leadership of George Vu and Louisa Sophocleous, who was their CTO. Now, the team was actually based in Cyprus and established in 2018 there. Weirdly, their address is a Somerset postcode, which is not too far from me. Might have to go and visit it. They are described as a producer of sustainable, succulent, flavorful food intended to use data modeling and materials chemistry to make delicious, fibrous, plant-based meat products and ingredients. The company has won awards for its products, such as Mighty Chicken Strips at the 2023 Vegan Awards, but it has just 10 employees and has been privately funded or bootstrapped since the beginning. No evidence of external investment rounds. Although, in 2023, they won the IFE Big Business Break competition that came with a prize of up to $500K in investment from Surya Foods, who are the co-founder of the initiative. Now, I think this might have been some grant funding. So it's actually a very small business that did the acquisition. Again, I don't know about sales numbers. What I do know is that the Mighty Kitchen bought Mighty Drinks. I mean, match made in heaven, right? And I do hope that this continues to give Mighty Drinks life. It does seem that the science and the food technology is really important to both these companies, and I think that that's a real area of overlap. So it'll be interesting to see kind of what's actually been purchased in this acquisition. I know for me as a founder, doing an acquisition feels like, thank God there is life to this thing, even though I don't feel like, or in my case, I was like, I'm burnt out. I don't feel like I can take this on the next phase of its journey. Somebody else needs to do it. It was really nice to give it legs. So I'm hoping that however much the founders are involved going forwards, that they're really happy about this deal because they get to see this thing that they created continue. But given that the Mighty Kitchen is such a small company, it does feel like this probably wasn't able to overcome all of the financial challenges. I wouldn't have thought it would have had a lot of cash reserves to put into the deal. But again, it'll be interesting to see if ever any information comes out about what that deal is. And I do look forward to seeing their accounts when they get filed. Yes, I am an entrepreneurial investigator. The Mighty Kitchen chief executive, George Fu, said, "This is exciting for us. We're proud to be able to pick up such a well-crafted brand and to make good use of the work that the team at Mighty has already done. The joint administrators are now focused on selling any remaining assets and winding up the administration." The administrators are still board members on Watkins Drinks, so I'm going to assume that there are still things being done to do that winding up of the administration. So we're just going to have to stay tuned to see what happens next. I do think maybe there will be a part 2 of this video one day. And speaking of future videos, in this series, Is This Marmite? I do want to know if there are any brands that are Marmite to you. Do you really love something that other people don't get? Do you really hate something that other people seem to really like? Let me know in the comments. So, to finish off, I'd like to leave you with the words of Nick Watkins. To fellow founders, this is part of the journey. To future collaborators, I'm taking time to reflect and recharge, and I'll be open to new opportunities soon. If you're navigating similar waters, I'd be happy to connect and share what we've learned. Thank you to everyone who has been part of this incredible adventure. So if you're a founder going through this, hopefully this story has helped you to see that even with a great product and actually starting when there was a gap in the market, ticking all of those boxes, it can still be incredibly challenging. But you aren't alone out there. There are people around you who you can reach out to. If you'd like to connect, please do. And otherwise, that's it for today. Don't forget to comment other businesses you would like me to do a video on. And I look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye.